You can recall in vivid detail a song that played once in the background of an ordinary afternoon 15 years ago. The exact moment, the specific feeling, sometimes even the weather. And yet you genuinely cannot remember what you ate for lunch yesterday, despite the fact that yesterday happened roughly 5,400 times more recently than that 15-year-old memory did. This isn't a sign that your memory is broken or unreliable in some general sense. It's the visible result of a very specific, very deliberate filtering system your brain runs constantly. One that has almost nothing to do with how recent or how objectively important something was, and almost everything to do with something most people never consider when they think about memory at all. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why your brain preserves certain moments with extraordinary precision while aggressively discarding others, even recent ones, and what this reveals about what your memory system is actually optimized to do. Stay until the end, because the last part explains how to deliberately use this mechanism to remember things you actually want to keep. Let's start with the foundational principle. Your brain was never built to store everything that happens to you. Given the sheer volume of sensory information you encounter every single day, indiscriminate storage would be catastrophically inefficient. So your memory system runs an aggressive, largely unconscious filtering process at the moment of encoding, deciding almost instantly what's worth committing to long-term storage and what gets discarded shortly after it occurs. The primary variable this filtering process uses isn't recency, and it isn't objective significance in any rational sense. It's emotional intensity at the moment of encoding. Here's the mechanism behind it. When something emotionally significant happens, even something small, like a particular song playing during an emotionally charged moment, your amygdala, the brain region heavily involved in processing emotional salience, becomes active alongside the hippocampus, the structure primarily responsible for forming new long-term memories. This coactivation does something specific and measurable. It strengthens the consolidation process for that memory, essentially flagging it as worth prioritizing for long-term storage. Research on emotional memory consistently shows that emotionally arousing events are remembered with significantly greater detail and durability than neutral events, even when both were encountered with similar levels of conscious attention at the time. This explains the song from 15 years ago directly. It wasn't preserved because it was musically significant or objectively memorable in any neutral sense. It was preserved because something about that specific moment carried genuine emotional charge, even if the emotion itself was mild, even if you couldn't fully articulate it at the time. The amygdala activation tagged that moment as worth keeping, and your hippocampus consolidated it accordingly, embedding it with a durability that ordinary, emotionally neutral experiences simply never receive. Now consider yesterday's lunch. Unless something unusual happened during that meal, an argument, an unexpected piece of news, a strong sensory surprise, the experience was almost certainly processed as routine. Routine experiences generate minimal emotional activation, which means minimal amygdala involvement, which means weaker memory consolidation, regardless of how recently the event occurred. Recency alone provides essentially no protection against forgetting if the underlying emotional signal was weak or absent. There's a second mechanism that compounds this specifically for routine, repetitive experiences, a phenomenon related to what researchers call the forgetting curve for undifferentiated repetition. When you eat lunch every single day, your brain isn't just failing to store yesterday's specific lunch. It's actively working against storing it, because each individual lunch closely resembles hundreds of other lunches that came before it, without a distinguishing emotional or novel element. Your brain has no clear signal to separate yesterday's specific lunch from the broader, generalized category of lunch that's been reinforced thousands of times. The memory system essentially collapses similar, low-salience repetitions into a general schema rather than preserving each instance individually, which is actually a highly efficient use of limited storage capacity. just one that happens to feel deeply counterintuitive when you're specifically trying to recall yesterday's particular version of an extremely common experience. This reveals something important about what memory is actually optimized to do. It was never designed to create an accurate, comprehensive archive of everything that happened to you, organized by recency or even by objective importance. It was designed to preserve information that was emotionally relevant enough in the moment to potentially matter for future survival, decision-making, or social understanding, and to discard efficiently and without sentiment vast quantities of routine, emotionally flat information that doesn't meet that threshold, regardless of how recently it occurred. There's a third layer worth naming specifically, because it explains why certain seemingly trivial details, a song, a smell, a specific phrase someone used, often survive intact decades later, sometimes more vividly than genuinely significant life events that lacked a strong emotional charge at the time. Memory consolidation isn't just influenced by the emotional significance of an event overall. It's influenced by the emotional significance present at the precise sensory moment something was encoded. This is why a relatively minor detail attached to a moment of genuine emotional intensity can outlast much more important information that happened to occur during an emotionally flat period. The brain isn't ranking memories by objective life significance after the fact. It's ranking them by how emotionally activated you were during the brief window when encoding actually occurred. So if this is how your memory system actually prioritizes information, how do you use this mechanism deliberately, rather than simply being subject to it? First, deliberately attach genuine emotional or sensory significance to information you actually want to retain, rather than relying on passive repetition alone. Repetition does strengthen memory, but emotional or sensory salience strengthens it far more efficiently. If you want to remember something specific, a piece of information, an important moment, a lesson you've learned, connecting it to a vivid emotional reaction, a specific sensory detail, or a personally meaningful association significantly increases the likelihood it survives long-term consolidation, compared to encountering the same information in a flat, routine way. Second, actively break routine moments you want to remember out of their undifferentiated category. If you want to remember a specific day, rather than having it collapse into a generalized blur of similar days, deliberately introduce a distinguishing element, a specific photograph, a brief written note about what made that particular day different, a small sensory anchor. This gives your memory system a clear differentiation signal that ordinary repetition, by itself, never provides. Third, pay closer attention during naturally emotionally charged moments, rather than letting your mind wander, since these moments already have a significant consolidation advantage built in. Being genuinely present during an emotionally significant event substantially increases the richness and accuracy of what gets encoded, building on an advantage your brain is already providing automatically rather than working against it through distraction. Fourth, stop interpreting forgotten routine details as a personal failure of memory. Forgetting yesterday's lunch isn't evidence that something is wrong with your recall ability. It's evidence that your memory system is functioning exactly as designed, correctly identifying low salience, highly repetitive information as not worth the storage cost, while reserving its limited long-term capacity for information that actually carried some kind of emotional or novel significance at the moment it occurred. Here's what ties this together. Your memory was never try to create a complete chronological record of your life. It was building a highly selective archive, prioritized almost entirely by emotional significance rather than recency or objective importance, discarding the overwhelming majority of routine experience to make room for the relatively small number of moments that actually carried some kind of meaningful charge. The song from 15 years ago and yesterday's forgotten lunch aren't a contradiction. They're the same system, working exactly as intended, applied to two very different kinds of moments. If this explains something you've experienced, tell us in the comments about a small, seemingly random memory that stayed vivid for years, while something far more recent has completely disappeared. And if you want to keep uncovering the hidden mechanics behind your own mind, the next video is right there, waiting for you.